Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Lost Planeswalker. You're with me, Jesse, The Lost Planeswalker, and today I'm showing off one of my favorite pet decks, Giada, Font of Hope, and I named it Hope for All. I don't know. I don't really have a deck name, but that's what I came up with. So, as we can see, 100 cards, legal. It is one of my more expensive decks, and since this is one of my decks, I wasn't going to replace some of the cards. So, yeah, I got some expensive ones in here. It's got a average salt sum right at 35, and yeah, so let's look at this commander. We have Giada, Font of Hope, 1 and a white, legendary creature angel, flying vigilance. Other angels you control enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on them for each angel you already control. Tap it to add a white, spend this mana only to cast angel spells. So, as I mentioned in my last video, this was a card I pulled from a pack, and I kind of was just staring at it, and I'm like, I bet this would work pretty well. And as I go through the cards, you're going to see that it works incredibly well. This is one of my strongest decks, and it is a little bit expensive, but it's well worth the cost. I've played so many games, and just this deck wins in so many different ways, and yeah, it's fantastic. So if you're looking to make an angel deck, Giada, Font of Hope is your next pick. So let's start off by running through some of those artifacts that I have in this deck. Starting off, we have Aetherflux Reservoir. Whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you cast this turn. Pay 50 life. Aetherflux Reservoir deals 50 damage to target creature or player. There are so many easy ways to gain a stupid amount of life in this deck that Aetherflux just becomes a loaded gun you hold in front of your opponents to not swing at you. And because you can activate it at instant speed, there's practically nothing they can do but just listen to you or die. So yeah, it's really good. Next, we have Alhamrit's Archive, legendary artifact. If you would gain life, you gain twice that much life instead. If you would draw a card, except the first one you would draw on each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. This is a really great card because there is some card draw, but not a lot in this deck, and this just amplifies it a lot. In addition, gaining double the amount of life you would gain just puts you so far ahead that it's really hard to catch up. Archaeomancer's Map, 2 and a white. When Archaeomancer's Map enters the battlefield, search your library for up to 2 basic Plains cards. Reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player controls more lands than you, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Avacyn's Memorial, 5 white. Legendary artifact, indestructible. Other legendary permanents you control have indestructible. This is just going to keep your commander and all those legendary angels around and make it so your opponents just can't get rid of them. Coat of Arms, 5 mana, artifact. Each creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield that shares at least 1 creature type with it. Cosmos Elixir, 4 mana, artifact. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card if your life total is greater than your starting life total. Otherwise, you gain 2 life. This is pretty much always going to draw you cards, and if not, a little bit of life gain is just going to help you out, because there's a lot of cards that trigger off you gaining a certain amount of life, so this is going to help. Herald's Horn, 3 generic, artifact. As Herald's Horn enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creature spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature card of the chosen type, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. This is just a generic all-around good artifact, especially for tribal decks, so this is going to help you out. Sword of the Animist, 2 generic, legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. Whenever equipped creature attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Equip for 2. Book of the Exalted Deeds, white, legendary artifact. At the beginning of your end step, if you gained 3 or more life this turn, create a 3/3 white angel creature token with flying. White, tap, exile Book of Exalted Deeds, put an enlightened counter on target angel. It gains you can't lose the game, and your opponents can't win the game. Activate only as a sorcery. Urza's Incubator, 3 generic, artifact. As Urza's Incubator enters battlefield, choose a creature type. Creature spells of chosen type cost 2 less to cast. Vanquisher's Banner, 5 generic, artifact. As Vanquisher's Banner enters battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type get +1/+1. Whenever you cast a creature spell of the chosen type, draw a card. They're all angels. They're all going to get +1/+1, and you're just going to draw more cards and hopefully draw into more angels. Wedding Ring, 2 white, artifact. When Wedding Ring enters battlefield, if it was cast, target opponent creates a token that's a copy of it. Whenever an opponent who controls an artifact named Wedding Ring draws a card during their turn, you draw a card. Whenever an opponent who controls an artifact named Wedding Ring gains life during your turn, you gain that much life. And lastly, we have Well of Lost Dreams, 4 generic artifact. Whenever you gain life, you may pay X, where X is less than or equal to the amount of life you gained. If you do, draw X cards. You're going to be getting a lot of life, so this is a great way to draw a bunch of cards. Now, moving on, let's talk about some of the creatures that I included in this deck. To no one's surprise, they're mainly angels. So starting off, we have Akroma, Vision of Ixidor, 5 white legendary creature angel, flying first strike vigilance trample. At the beginning of each combat until end of turn, each other creature you control gets +1/+1 if it has flying, +1/+1 if it has first strike, and so on for double strike, death touch, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, protection, reach, trample, vigilance, and partner. And it has partner. Next, we have Angel of Destiny, 3 white, and this is one of the coolest win cons in this deck. Creature, Angel Cleric, flying double strike. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each gain that much life. At the beginning of your end step, if you have at least 15 more life than your starting life total, each player, Angel of Destiny, attack this turn, loses the game. This works so good in our deck because even if you don't have a lot of life gain, as soon as you play this, your big angels are just going to deal a bunch of damage, and you can basically knock out whoever you want on your next turn. Angel of Jubilation, 1 white, creature angel, flying. Other non-black creatures you control get +1/+1. Players can't pay life or sacrifice creatures to cast spells or activate abilities. Angelic Guardian, 4 white, creature angel, flying. Whenever one or more creatures you control attack, they gain indestructible until end of turn. Angelic Skirmisher, 4 white, creature angel, flying. At the beginning of each combat, choose first strike, vigilance, or lifelink. Creatures you control gain that ability until end of turn. One of the best parts about this card is it says at the beginning of each combat, not just yours. So you can get first strike, vigilance, or lifelink during each of those combats, whichever one is most helpful to you. Vigilance could be helpful on your turn, so you can have blockers up, and you can choose either first strike or lifelink on your opponent's turns. It's really powerful, and they don't make cards like this anymore. Archangel of Thune, 3 white, creature angel, flying lifelink. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Archangel of Tithes, 1 white, creature angel, flying. As long as Archangel of Tithes is untapped, creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. As long as Archangel of Tithes is attacking, creatures can't block unless the controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. Next is my favorite card in this deck, Avacyn, Angel of Hope, 5 white, legendary creature angel, flying, vigilance, indestructible. Other permanents you control have indestructible. Not only is she an 8/8 angel, but when she comes into the battlefield, you probably have 6, 7, 8 other angels, so she starts off at like a 16/16. It's incredible in this deck. Along with, she protects all your other permanents. Avacyn is just one of my favorite creatures in general, and she is the most important creature in this deck for sure. Baneslayer Angel, 3 white, creature angel, flying, first strike, lifelink, protection from demons and from dragons. Battle Angels of Tyr, 2 white, creature angel knight, flying in Myriad. Whenever Battle Angels of Tyr deals combat damage to a player, draw a card if that player has more cards in hand than each other player. Then you create a treasure token if that player controls more lands than each other player. Then you gain 3 life if a player has more life than each other player. Battle Grace Angel, 3 white, creature angel, flying, exalted. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, that creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gains lifelink until end of turn. Bishop of Wings, white, creature human cleric. Whenever an angel enters a battlefield under your control, you gain 4 life. Whenever an angel you control dies, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. It's kind of cool that it makes these 1/1 spirits, but that you gain 4 life is a really great ability, because even if you can't attack, there's a lot of triggers that activate on you gaining 4 or 5 life, so this is really good. Next, we have Blinding Angel, 3 white, creature angel, flying. Whenever Blinding Angel deals combat damage to a player, that player skips his or her next combat phase. This card does get a little mean, so I'd be careful because, if you keep doing this to the same person, they might just get mad at you and not want to play anymore. Emeria Shepherd, 5 white, creature angel, flying, landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, you may return target non-land permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. If that land is a plains, you may return a non-land permanent card to the battlefield instead. Esper Sentinel, single white, artifact creature, human soldier. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. 1/1. Glorious Enforcer, 5 white white, creature angel, flying, lifelink. At the beginning of each combat, if you have more life than an opponent, Glorious Enforcer gains double strike until end of turn. Gold Knight Redeemer, 4 white white, creature angel, flying. When Gold Knight Redeemer enters battlefield, you gain 2 life for each other creature you control. This can gain you a lot of life if you have a lot of creatures on the board. Herald of War, 3 white white, creature angel, flying. Whenever Herald of War attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Angel spells and human spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each +1/+1 counter on Herald of War. This is a super great card, especially paired with our commander, because we automatically put counters on her when she enters the battlefield. So that just means that all of our angels and humans, which there's a couple of, are discounted heavily. Linvala, Keeper of Secrets, 2 white white, legendary creature angel, flying. Activated abilities of creatures your opponents control can't be activated. Lyra Dawnbringer, 3 white white, legendary creature angel, flying, first strike, lifelink. Other angels you control get +1/+1 and have lifelink. I love this card. It's great. It gives all angels +1/+1 and lifelink, so I couldn't be happier. Resplendent Angel, 1 white white, creature angel, flying. At the beginning of each end step, if you gained 5 or more life this turn, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. 3 white white white, until end of turn, Resplendent Angel gets +2/+2 and gains lifelink. Rhea Dawnbringer, 6 white white white, legendary creature angel, flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Righteous Valkyrie, 2 and a white, creature angel cleric, flying. Whenever another angel or cleric enters battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. As long as you have at least 7 or more life than your starting life total, creatures you control get +2/+2. This card just works so well, and because all of your cards are pretty much angels or clerics, you're going to gain life no matter what comes into the battlefield. Sephira Sky's Blade, 4 white white white, legendary creature angel. You may pay white and tap 4 untapped creatures you control with flying, rather than paying for this spell's mana cost. Flying and lifelink. Other creatures you control with flying have indestructible. Just like the other indestructible cards in this deck, it's super great, super powerful, and we want to keep our creatures on the board. Shattered Angel, 3 white white, creature angel, flying. Whenever a land enters a battlefield under an opponent's control, you may gain 3 life. Well, you normally gain about 9 life off this card each turn, so it's well worth it. Sigarda's Vanguard, 4 and a white, creature angel, flash, flying. Whenever Sigarda's Vanguard enters the battlefield or attacks, choose any number of creatures with different powers. Those creatures gain double strike until end of turn. Speaker of the Heavens, single white, creature human cleric, vigilance, lifelink. Tap to create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. Activate this ability only if you have at least 7 or more life than your starting life total, and only anytime you could cast a sorcery. And before long, you're going to be pumping out 4/4 white angel creature tokens with Giada's ability, Starnheim Aspirant, 2 and a white, creature human cleric. Angel spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. This is an amazing card. It makes all your angels way cheaper. It's very powerful. Valkyrie Harbinger, 4 white white, creature angel cleric, flying and lifelink. At the beginning of each end step, if you gain 4 more life this turn, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. This is every end step, so you could creating 4/4s each turn, and that's really great. Verge Rangers, 2 and a white, creature human scout, first strike. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. As long as the opponent controls more lands than you, you may play lands from the top of your library. This is a great way to ramp in white. There's not that many white cards that have this ability or anything even close to it, so it can be really helpful, not only in this deck, but other mono white decks also. And finally, Weathered Wayfarer, single white, creature human nomad cleric. White and tap. Search your library for a land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. Activate only if an opponent controls more lands than you. This is a great card because you can search for any land card. Now, let's take a look at some of those enchantments we included in this deck. We got a total of 9 enchantments, and let's start with Angelic Accord. 3 and a white enchantment. At the beginning of each end step, if you gain 4 more life this turn, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. There's lots of ways to gain life, and we may be able to pump out a lot of angels each round. Angelic Chorus. 3 white white. Enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to its toughness. This gets better when Giada is out there because your angels are just come out bigger and bigger the more you play them, and you're going to gain more life. Next, Authority of the Councils. Single white enchantment. Creatures your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you gain 1 life. I find that this card is especially good against token decks because you just gain all that life from all those tokens that are being created, and you're going to have a giant board of angels to block with, so you really don't have to fear them getting through. Folk Hero is one of my newest additions to this deck. For 1 and a white, Legendary Enchantment background. Commander creatures you own have, whenever you cast a spell that shares a creature type with this creature, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Since almost all of our cards are angels, we're going to be drawing a lot of cards every time we play one of our creatures. Ghostly Prison. 2 and a white, enchantment. Creatures can't attack unless their controller pays 2 for each creature they control that's attacking you. This is so powerful because it's going to either make your opponent swing in with you and use all their mana that way, or cast spells. So it's a double-edged sword for them. Next, one of maybe the most powerful white cards, we have Land Tax. Single white enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you may search your library for up to 3 basic land cards. Reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. Legion Loyalty. 6 white enchantment. Creatures you control have Myriad. This card goes absolutely ballistic when you have Giada out there because you're just going to make a whole bunch of copies of creatures. They're going to get a whole bunch of +1/+1 counters, and your board state is going to be so threatening and devastating to your opponents. Luminarch Ascension. 1 and a white enchantment. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if you didn't lose life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Luminarch Ascension. 1 and a white. Create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. Activate this ability only if Luminarch Ascension has 4 or more quest counters on it. This is undoubtedly one of the best cards, and especially the best enchantment in this deck. You will very easily get to the point where you didn't lose life this turn, and be able to pump out angels, and now you're paying 2 mana for a 5/5, a 6/6, a 7/7, and 8/8 with Giada out there, and you can do this multiple times per turn, so your board state gets very big, very fast. And our last enchantment is Smothering Tithe. 3 and a white enchantment. Whenever an opponent draws a card, you may pay 2. If that player doesn't, you create a treasure token. This is just a great way to ramp, and there's not very many ways, so that's why this is in here. Now, let's take a look at some of the instants in the deck. Starting off, we have Brought Back. White instant. Choose up to 2 target permanent cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. Return them to the battlefield tapped. If there's a board wipe, well, get back your 2 best things that died. Cabrei Takedown. 1 and a white. Instant. Cabrei Takedown deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature or planeswalker. And the other side is just a land that taps for white. This is a great card because we will have a lot of creatures and we can basically kill whatever creature we want. Path to Exile. Single white instant. Exile target creature. Its controller may search the library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Return to Dust. 2 white instant. Exile target artifact or enchantment. If you cast the spell during your main phase, you may exile up to 1 other target artifact or enchantment. This is a little costly because there's a lot of good spells that do this, but one of the most important things is it exiles them. And that's really strong because a lot of decks have recursion for the most important pieces, but you can't get them back if you exile them. Swords of Plowshares. Single white, instant. Exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. Teferi's Protection. 2 and a white, instant. Until your next turn, your life total can't change, and you gain protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out. Then, exile Teferi's Protection. Tithe. Single white, instant. Search your library for a Plains card. If you control fewer lands than target opponent, you may search your library for an additional Plains card. Reveal those cards to all players, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. The best part about this card is it says Plains, not basic Plains. So, you can get all those utility Plains out of your library. Next, let's take a look at some of the lands I included in this deck. Now, typically I like to keep it pretty basic, but this is one of my decks, so I definitely tricked it out with some of these lands. Castle Ardenvale. Land. Castle Ardenvale enters battlefield tapped unless you control a Plains. Taps are white, or 2 white, tap, create a 1/1 white human creature token. You never know if you're going to need a human creature token, so it's not too bad. Next is Cave of the Frost Dragon. Land. If you control 2 or more other lands, Cave of the Frost Dragon enters battlefield tapped. Tap it to add a white. Or 4 and a white, Cave of the Frost Dragon becomes a 3/4 white dragon creature token until end of turn. It's still a land. Iganjo, Seat of the Empire. Legendary land. Tap it to add a white, or channel for 2 and a white, discard Iganjo, Seat of the Empire. It deals 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. This is just a great white land, or you can just tap it in Emiria the Sky Ruin. Land. Emiria the Sky Ruin enters battlefield tapped. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 7 or more planes, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Tap it to add a white to your mana pool. This is such a great card and really only works in mono white decks and can become incredibly powerful if you can get to that 7 land drop. Hall of Heliod's Generosity. Legendary land. Tap it to add a colorless, or for 1 and a white, put target enchantment card from your graveyard on top of your library. Maybe your opponent gets rid of one of your cool enchantments. You can get it right back. Idyllic Grange. Land, plains. Idyllic Grange enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 3 or more other planes. When Idyllic Grange enters the battlefield untapped, put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control. You're going to be playing a lot of planes, so you might as well put a +1/+1 on another creature. Karo. Land. Karo enters battlefield tapped. When Karo enters battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return an untapped planes you control to its owner's hand. Tap to add 1 and a white to your mana pool. Mistvale Plains. Land, plains. Tap it to add a white. Mistvale Plains enters battlefield tapped. White, tap, put target card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. Activate this ability only if you control 2 or more white permanents. This would be good in like a 2-color deck that maybe you got rid of something good and you can tutor it back up. Otherwise, maybe you do some shuffling and you'll redraw it. New Benalia. Land. New Benalia enters battlefield tapped. When New Benalia enters the battlefield, scry 1. Tap to add a white. Nykthos. Shrine to Nyx. Legendary land. Tap to add 1 colorless to your mana pool. 2. Tap. Choose a color. Add to your mana pool an amount of mana, that color equal to your devotion to that color. Since we're playing mono white, you can make an insane amount of mono white. We have some creatures that have 2 to 3 mono white pips, so you can generate a ton of mana and cast your big spells very easily with this card. Next, we got just regular basic planes. Got about 20 of them in the deck. Radiant Fountain. Land. When Radiant Fountain enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. Tap to add a colorless. This can definitely help you hit that life gain you need to trigger some abilities. Reliquary Tower. Land. You have no maximum hand size. Tap to add a colorless. Seraph Sanctuary. Land. When Seraph Sanctuary enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. Whenever an angel enters battlefield under control, you gain 1 life. Tap to add colorless to your mana pool. Windbrisk Height. Land. Hideaway 4. Windbrisk Height enters the battlefield tapped. Tap to add a colorless. Wait and tap. You may play an exiled card without paying its mana cost if you attacked with 3 or more creatures this turn. Since all your creatures got flying, you really don't have to risk anything by swinging in most of the time, and you get a card for free. Now, let's move on to Planeswalkers. I have 2 Planeswalkers in this deck that are both a little angel-themed. Elspeth Resplendent. 3 white, legendary Planeswalker, Elspeth. +1. Choose up to 1 target creature. Put a +1/+1 counter and a counter of among flying, first strike, lifelink, or vigilance on it. -3. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may put a permanent card with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield with a shield counter on it. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And -7. Create 5 3/3 white angel creature tokens with flying. That -7 ability is very strong if you can get to it, but that +1 is pretty good, because we can give some of our creatures first strike, lifelink, and vigilance, and since it's counter, it just doesn't go away at the end of the turn. And our second Planeswalker is Sarah the Benevolent. 2 white, legendary Planeswalker Sarah. Creatures you control with flying get +1/+1 until end of turn. -3. Create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. And then -6. You get an emblem with, if you control a creature, damage that will reduce your life total to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead. Basically, as long as we can hold on to a creature, we can't die. And that's why this card is so powerful in this deck. Now, let's take a look at some of those sorceries, because there's only 3 in this deck, and I think all of them are really good. Entreat the Angels. XX white. Sorcery. Create X 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying. Or, for Miracle, X white. You may cast this card for its miracle cost when you draw it, if it's the first card you drew this turn. Gift of Estates. 1 and a white. Sorcery. If an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for up to 3 plains cards. Reveal them, put them in your hand, then shuffle your library. This is a pretty epic card, because even green can't tutor 3 lands for 1 and a white, so this is pretty great. And finally, we have Mouse Calcify. 5 white. Sorcery. Destroy all non-white creatures. While this may not clear the board entirely, it's a one-sided board wipe in white that's going to keep your board safe and get rid of everybody else's. So if we look at the stats a little bit here, Obviously, mono white, don't really have to worry about that. But what we can look at is the mana curve. This is a bit higher of a mana curve than I normally build with a 4 as its average. But something you have to keep in mind is that with our commander, we can tap to add 1 mana. So it's really, really strong, actually, to have a higher mana curve because on turn 3, you can pop out a 4 mana cost card. So we want those high mana cost cards, and it's just super, super powerful. It ramps you just slightly enough that it really amazingly puts you ahead. You wouldn't believe how many times I miss a land drop, but because of my commander, I can still cast a big angel. It's really good, especially for white. We've got some artifacts, creatures. Our subtypes are mainly angels, like we expected, and surprisingly, a good amount of tokens. To no one's surprise, we got angel, 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 copy, a human, a spirit, and a treasure. And then one extra is just that Sarah the Benevolent emblem, if it'll load here. But, yeah. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Like I said, this is one of my favorite decks to play. It's so amazing. It's so strong. It's so powerful. And I really hope that if you're interested in building a Giada deck, you will be pleasantly surprised. And yeah, so thank you so much for watching. You know, if you consider leaving a comment and like down below, maybe there's a card I should add in here. You know, I looked through a lot of cards, but maybe a new one popped up or something I didn't even think about would be great in here. And if you would please consider subscribing, that would mean the world to me. I'm trying to put out a lot of good content. We got March of the Machines coming up. I'm going to be posting some videos about that as new cards get spoiled, and I hope you watch. But that's it. So, I hope you have a great day, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.